Oh, this is a time capsule.
You're listening to a mostly harmless cutaway.
Mostly harmless. Mostly harmless? Oh, come. I think that's pretty good coverage for a disintegrated pile of rubble.
Hi, this is Eric.
This is Isaac.
And welcome back. This is Mostly Harmless Cutaway, episode 192, don't you know? And I had said on some previous episode, not too long ago, an unearthly child hit the feed. We were here with Isaac, starting with what is essentially the pilot and original story of Doctor Who. I had mentioned that we would follow up and jump to 2005 before returning back to 1963. I had also said that we would continue as a commentary series. But if you read the description on your podcasting device, this is not going to be a live commentary. This is going to be a discussion. And Isaac, why do you prefer the discussion format for this episode or story, whatever you want to call it?
Had you asked me this 5 years ago, I would have said commentary, and we would have had the listeners just go right by in 45 minutes, and that's it. I felt like even before watching it, I took one look at the length, and I said, oh, this needs to be a discussion over this instead of because I feel like chronologically, even though we're watching it right now in the backgrounds, I might say something and be like, wait, okay, no, we missed it already.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Do you think, and obviously you've seen this already, the episode in question.
Yep.
I mean, do you think it warrants a conversation longer than a traditional 45 minutes?
I'm not sure. We're going to find out.
Okay. And I was thinking today before, in preparation for this, I was thinking in a way, even though this is mostly harmless cutaway, it's like we're doing a sort of segment you have on Novice Elitists, the podcast you started on. Well, I don't know if it was your first, but certainly your bread and butter outside of MHC and the other things we do together now. This is sort of like your Pilotsville thing in a way, because we essentially did watch the pilot last time you and I were talking Doctor Who, and we've just jumped to another pilot because, of course, this is what it was like. This is literally what it was when Doctor Who was resurrected, if you will, in 2005. So it's sort of like we're doing a Doctor Who Pilotsville back to back. And part of the reason I wanted to do it that way, even though I wasn't thinking of it as a Pilotsville, but obviously now you have the opportunity to compare and contrast the show debuting in the 60s and basically being brought to a whole brand new generation in 2005.
And boy, is it 2005.
Why do you say that?
Oh, this is a time capsule. I don't know if other series thereafter, other Doctors have revisited 2005, because I don't even know, because they've probably gone back in time to other points in history, probably the 70s. It's just, I don't know, I find it ironic when, not ironic, okay, I don't know the word for it, but I find it interesting when if it's a ongoing and long form story with a same character and they time travel. Well, this one especially, of course, this makes sense. Comic books, it's a little American mainstream comic book superheroes. They'll have their time travel episodes or issues or whatnot. This is obviously
and Star Trek, of course, has
that
its time travel episodes.
But with this, given that it's usually the companion. I say usually. Sorry. I'm guessing the companions in each series prior to this one were from their day and age when it was made, of course, circa the contemporary times or the present times at that point.
By and large, that is true, but not always true.
This is fair. It's funny if this show, and again, proceeding after Eccleston. Am I saying his name right, by the way? I want to make sure I make that. Eccleston, thank you. Every Doctor succeeding Eccleston, if they went back to the 70s, for instance, it'd be just funny because it's we're going to recreate the 70s, but this show has already done the 70s. So it's just funny seeing retroactively, and this is not for nostalgia bait or anything like that, but just funny how like period inaccurate they could get of just like, well, we had shows, like Kojak, or the Rockford Files or Columbo in the 70s. And, we do something like that modern times on television. It's like, it doesn't really look like that. I mean, whatever. It's
I know what you're saying.
Suspension of disbelief, as you like to say.
Yeah, and whether we were just watching the classic show or the new show, either way, if you watch enough of it, either version, they don't do it all the time, but they definitely do it. In the classic and modern series, they revisit a specific time period that they've been to before, except 10 years after the fact or longer. And so eventually, hopefully, we'll get to some of those episodes, and you'll get to see how that pans out. So, do you have any nostalgia in general for 2005? Not just your own personal experiences, but kind of remembering shows and what shows were like circa 2005?
I was, let's see, like one of the, Caleb will obviously mention Lex, which I swear I've never seen until like
Lex.
Lex, yeah.
LEX? I don't think I've ever heard of it.
Double X, actually. We're talking live action here. I was a lot more into cartoons and animation, not just, Japanese, but more American and Canadian animations. So I didn't really, music videos were more what I was into, what I was exposed to because of my friends. So that stuff remains like nostalgic to me, or at least, what I can recognize as. But like for live action, like you got Zix, which basically looked like Halo at one point. It was a live action mixed with like CG animation where it was this alien funny thing, and they like go into this like game world or whatever. It's not Reboot, but you can almost swear it is. It had like the season.
It was like real people in like a CGI world.
Yeah, it was. I think one of them was. I think the main lead. She was from Degrassi. Of course she was. But the seasons later were called like Zix Level 2 and 3. That's kind of funny. But so they got around that with like, instead of, Japanese tokusatsu, they just instead did everything in like CGI afterwards. And then you had like Galador, which was a Lego tie-in, but also had this like, it had this machine that can go into like different dimensions and had these wacky characters. And it was that was a little more like tokusatsu. It also had like a Power Rangers vibe to it, but I didn't see all of that. So
this is wild.
I know,
because I never even heard of any of these shows before. But I know American shows that are a little bit similar, so I can imagine in that way. But I never heard of these properties.
Yeah, and obviously you have random reference to anybody who remembers this. Do you want fries with that? That was another one of like the live shows that they would show on.
That's what it was called?
Yeah.
Do you want fries with that?
Do you want that? You want fries with that? And it was centered on these, teenagers who were working at this like fast food joint basically, and all the, not dramas, but all the comedy that they could get out of being inside, a storefront property like that. Oh, and then of course like the Red Green Show, but I mean that was also 90s at the time. So the point being is that my take on and my vision of what the aughts were to me were very and drastically different from, I think, my peers.
Sure.
Because obviously Caleb was watching a lot more live action stuff than I was. My live action stuff was either watching TLC or the Weather Channel.
Yeah, when I was quite young, and when there weren't many options for over-the-air programming, and of course, because of where I was, I very much remember my first live-action shows that I watched a lot, like in my elementary years. And I always remember the very first two live-action shows I was into, because obviously when I was 5, 6, 7, I was more into animated cartoons as well. But when it got later at night, I definitely, wanted to see whatever was on. And my first two live action shows at that time were TOS Star Trek and what was then current day Doctor Who. Those were my two first and favorite live action. And then, even though I was in England, I saw all the popular American shows that were coming out at that time, like the A-Team, Knight Rider, Manimal, and then other primetime stuff like Dallas, Dynasty. I would see those things also in England. So yeah, those are like kind of all my first live action shows that I saw on a regular or semi-regular basis in those days. But focusing on 2005, for myself, obviously I was a lot older in 2005 than you were, and I have a fairly good memory of the types of live action shows, especially the ones that were aimed at like a young adult audience in the United States. I can really remember what those shows were like circa 2005, like the way they dressed, the way they spoke, the kinds of subjects that would come up, the cinematography of those television shows at the time. And then, because I've always watched a little bit of British programming, even when I didn't live in England, I was kind of familiar with what 2005 looked like from a British television or movie point of view. So I very much remember the American version and the British version circa 2005. And every time I revisit this, because I have seen this episode awful many times over the years. I can't believe it's been 20 years now since this came out. But every time I watch it, it very much reminds me of television in general, 2005, but even especially British television, 2005. So yeah. Obviously, before now, the only Doctor Who you've ever seen was the Christmas special in 2024 and an Unearthly Child, obviously. And now this, right? So you've seen, very beginning Doctor Who, sort of like the beginning of the new age of Doctor Who, now with this. And you have seen one of the most recent episodes that has aired for this series. Just in general, even though there's a lot of years in separation of the air dates, does it feel at this point that all the things you've seen in some sense are cohesive, like in the same television universe? Kind of like if you would watch TOS, then you watch TNG, and then you watched Strange New Worlds or something. Like, does it have some kind of cohesion to you that it's the same, or do any one of the three examples of Doctor Who seem like it doesn't fit with the others?
I'm going to go with the latter, with option B that you gave.
Explain.
This, to me, if I may, screams of when a long-standing American mainstream comic book character is handed off to a new writer.
Okay.
So the impetus, obviously, is Stan Lee and Steve Ditko creating the Spider-Man.
Okay.
And then eventually it changes hands of artists and writer and goes through many different character arcs, storylines, some repeated, some new, adding new history that we didn't know of prior to, just to change up the formula or to, again, keep the readers engaged and or to just keep making money. I'm not really too sure.
Okay, that's a very, very fair comparison. Now, if we just focus on the two newer ones that this one and the Christmas special, does that also feel like perhaps it was two different artists behind the scenes, or do those feel closer together?
Do you mean in terms of writing or in terms of visuals?
Like production team or whoever's behind making it.
Oh, no, unfortunately that...
Like if it was a comic book, does it feel like it's still the same writer and penciler from 20 years ago, or has it already been handed over again?
Penciler, definitely not. These are definitely very two different like pencilers.
Okay.
As for writer, I know RTD is, I think RTD, he was, I don't know why I want to say RTD too. He was involved in the 2024 Christmas special, correct?
Right. He was the same person, same showrunner for Rose and for Joy to the World. Now, of course, he wasn't the same guy from 20 years ago, like all the way through. It changed hands, if you will, in between. But he came back in something like, I can't remember if it was 2022 or 2023 when he came back to being showrunner. So obviously he wasn't the showrunner like the whole time in between.
Yes, I remember Caleb lamenting his return. But other than that, like, maybe I definitely, as you've mentioned, I can see, like, this does have maybe like a traditional pilot to it where it sets up lots of stuff probably going forward. But again, this is different than Unearthly Child. I assume, well, for one, I don't recall in Unearthly Child them having on the next episode of Doctor Who, they don't have that, of course, but in this they had I'm pretty sure, is that also in the DVD, or is that just on like the version I'm watching?
No, it was on the DVD. It was on the initial airing. It was always there.
Okay.
No matter how you downloaded it or purchased it,
it's always going to be
or
there.
Watched it live on television, it was the same. And although they may not have done it with the first story, but early in Doctor Who, they wouldn't do it next time. But what they did, a lot like older James Bond movies and newer ones, it became common in the 60s Doctor Who to, at the end of an episode, to just tell you what the next story name is going to be. But yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And in television, I mean, for classic Doctor Who, I don't know about the 60s as much, but certainly in the other decades, the more recent decades of classic, you would get the regular adverts, during the daytime, during the weekend, like you do with any television show that you're used to, where they'll be like, tune in next week on Doctor Who. And, they have like a little sizzle reel that's like 5 or 10 seconds long. I remember those growing up. And if you buy the classic DVDs, sometimes they have some of those on there, but not right after the show aired. What do you think about this? Because it was essentially functioning as, a reintroduction to many people of an age who had never, ever seen Doctor Who. And it was definitely designed for people who could watch it with no prior knowledge at all. How do you think it worked like that? And would you have needed it? Would you have wanted it if you had been a longtime Doctor Who fan already? Or do you appreciate it regardless? I don't know. What do you think?
Oh, you read my mind. I literally was thinking that of like, what I didn't think of and take into consideration until right before you asked that question was, oh, right, this is a brand new, so I don't know how long Doctor Who has been off the air for at this point, but we have a case of, okay, let's revamp Ultimate Universe, anybody? And for those who are fans of the character from back in the day, well, this is brand new. This is like in your face. Not in that sense, because I was definitely getting some Austin Powers to this for some reason. But it definitely is, I think, trying to, I don't want to say appeal, but it is going, like, especially, I don't know, with like Eccleston, but with Rose and her boyfriend, they are very much like, modern people at the time, contemporary people of the time. So it definitely draws in and I don't know if these two actors were in prior not series, but in other like medias that, the age category or the target audience would be like, oh, hey, I know them. So I like them. Therefore I'm going to watch the show. I assume maybe they were looking for actors who people would know, and that would attract people again by target demographic. And I don't know what Eccleston was doing prior to this. I'm not going to speculate like we did the other night with Howard's End. But this is just very like 2005. I'm sorry, I just kept like.
That's on the Best Picture podcast, by the way, Howard's End. In case you're like, I don't remember that Doctor Who story.
Oh, just you wait. They'll visit Howard's End one of these days. They probably should. Like, it's based off a book.
Oh, they definitely visit places that are like Howard's End. Definitely.
But not the Howard's End.
No, that I'm aware of. But I'll have to look up if maybe the same estate was used in filming a Doctor Who, because there's a chance.
I was okay. This is it. Probably looks similar. I can't remember. Caleb showed me this film called The Beast Must Die years ago, and when we watched Howard's End, I'm like, that's not the same house that was used in that film, right? That's just like a utter coincidence, right?
It always could be, or it could be coincidental, because
Yep.
there are many manors that look that way in England, but then there are certain ones that have been reused for a lot of different films and television. So, 50-50 chance.
Of course.
So the original series ran from 63 and ended in 89. There was this one-time 90-minute television movie that was made for American audiences, produced in Canada, that at the time and is meant to be canonical within the Doctor Who universe, even though it in of itself, being a one-off, has its own unique flavor, because it was literally a one-off, produced and released in 1996. And then this was the next on-screen Doctor Who to ever happen outside of parody and satire. We got this in 2005. So yes, it had definitely been a while, no matter how you slice it. And me, having grown up with Doctor Who since the 80s, I was excited as I could ever be to get to watch this in 2005. And in terms of any of the actors being known at the time that this was made, I'm not an expert on British culture 2005. And while someone who watched all of British television up to that point probably recognized a lot of these other side characters from other things, I'll say in the general consciousness, the only people who would have kind of been prominently known before this episode would have been Christopher Eccleston and Billie Piper, who plays Rose. Because Christopher Eccleston was already known, not just in England, for having serious dramatic roles in some films prior to this, most notably the movie Elizabeth, starring Kate Blanchett, that came out in 97, I want to say. So he was definitely known as like a serious British dramatic actor. And then Billie Piper, before this, she was like a little pop star sensation in England. Not like mega popular. She wasn't so popular that she was known across the pond, but certainly locally in England, she was kind of known as like, a little British pop star. But the other people I think generally would have been unknown in the public consciousness.
So that's if, for instance, if there was like a American equivalent of Doctor Who in around this time, maybe a little later, it'd be like Demi Lovato as like the companion.
Yes, except probably not even as popular as Demi Lovato, or maybe like maybe a Demi Lovato or a Miley Cyrus or whatever before they became super famous. You know what I mean?
Ariana Grande. There we go. When she was on Victorious.
Yeah, but any one of those people when they were coming out of their Disney or Nickelodeon days, but before they hit like their, mainstream days. So yeah, she would be like those people if you catch them at the right time before they become really famous.
I gotta ask, was there? I mean, I don't know if you knew. I don't know if you knew this at the time, but for those fans like older than you who were watching, Unearthly Child, I guess, from an onward, who stuck with it all those years, do you think they were, they reacted to this episode positively or perhaps negatively?
I would think more positive than negative, but not necessarily enamored by it. It would be just like for you, we've talked about the Michael Bay Transformer movies and Transformers in general a lot. It would be kind of like that, something back in the day coming back. Or if you were like a massive fan of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and they hadn't produced new content for 20 years, then all of a sudden they had like a new cartoon or movie or something. It would be just relatively speaking, kind of like that, I imagine. Yeah, and especially initially, because no one knew for sure if it was going to be any kind of success. This first series, as they call it, or season, for all anybody knew, it would be like a lot of revivals where there's just kind of one season, and then it's like, okay, that was fun, and nothing comes of it. But this show did become quite popular in England upon the revival, and it went through several years post 2005 where it was quite popular in terms of ratings and everything like that. And of course, it became popular in the United States later, and a lot of those people, I imagine, but not all of them, of course, weren't old-time fans of Doctor Who, but once they saw this version, 2005, a fan base definitely got created in the United States as well eventually. It took a little bit of time because in the early years of New Doctor Who, you wouldn't get to see this stuff in the United States until like a year and a half had passed. So we were kind of delayed if you were watching through normal television means, etc. But it definitely gradually built a new fan base of American fans who were not familiar with the classic series as well. So, what do you think of this introduction of the premise, our protagonists, set up for this story? How does it grab you for if we pretend like it's a 45-minute pilot for a new series, even if it is a revival?
Similar to Unearthly Child, we largely start off, probably intentional, of course. We largely start off with introducing the companions of this. I like how in the original, I don't think I said this in the commentary, but I liked how it was almost, retroactively speaking, because of how pilots are or just series are structured nowadays. How you'll be introduced to like a cast member or whatnot. I kind of like how they subverted expectations where we think that not Barbara, but the granddaughter, I forget her name. Sorry, but I just remember
Susan.
Susan, thank you. We think Susan is going to be the protagonist to that, but it's really just Barbara and
Ian.
Ian, thank you. It's Barbara and Ian instead. So in this, I'm not saying play it straight, but I mean, okay, who cares, whatever. So it's just funny that they play it, I guess, straight with Rose here. How we basically just, again, focus on Rose is your average person. She's an every woman in, is it London, I guess? Yeah, it's in
Yes.
London right now. So at the time of this currently airing. So, this is any normal person, and she's about to have her world strung upside down. That's basic premise number one, and then in comes a certain person and plot, and there's your summary of saving their world quite quickly, and disposing of like this interesting faction of individuals whom I assume we'll probably see later on at some point. I don't assume that he wiped out the entire race.
I will neither confirm or deny the future, but I will say it's not really a spoiler, but they are a protagonist who existed before. I will say that in the series.
Probably portrayed differently, of course, back then.
Differently, but similar enough. Certainly they're the same and go by the same name. With I don't know if they said it in this, but like the drones, so to speak, are known as autons. I don't think they said that in this story.
I saw it in the credits.
Oh, and then, but the Nestine was named before in the classic, but I don't think the Nestine was ever seen in this way. I can't remember on that point in the classic series. But was it good enough for 45-minute television? Did it feel rushed? Do you feel like you needed more should have been fleshed out on the backstory? Or what do you think? Like just to get acquainted with these characters and the situation and the TARDIS? Because obviously this doesn't have time to breathe the way 4 22-minute episodes would.
No, this was action packed. This was very like, to the next bit, to the next bit, to the next bit. We didn't see Rose interact with a lot of her cohorts at work. We just get brief montage. Like, it's almost like, I'd say almost like near half montage of this, and maybe not half montage. That's not
I know
true.
what you mean.
But it is really just like I think it is trying to be like it is an adventure plot, I suppose. So it'd be interesting to see Davis, if he ever, or Davey, excuse me, if he ever got the chance to like write either a James Bond novel or a comic or even an Indiana Jones novel, because I wonder how he would portray that kind of stuff. I know I'm probably saying sacrilege, and Caleb's having like a heart attack of me saying that, but because this is just all action and like, I'm not saying little character does not necessarily mean it's bad. Like, Indiana Jones isn't the most complex character in the history of film. He's just, as you've probably, the archetype of being the adventurer, or excuse me,
well, of course, it's because it's the movie format that we mostly experience Indiana Jones. I know there's novelizations and things,
of course,
but of course, when there was the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles series, where you have like a full season of adventures and whatnot, then of course you start to learn more about the character in particular. But that just has to do with the format, obviously. Just seeing somebody in movies versus a whole entire series. Did any of it seem scary or thrilling to you now? And or what do you think your reaction would have been had you seen this in 2005?
Well, when we first did, when Rose first goes into that room with the mannequins, I jokingly said, "Oh, are the mannequins gonna come to life?" Later they did. I'm like, "Oh, okay." They probably would have scared me if I was, because I was. What month was this released?
Oh my god, I don't have this in front of me. I think
That's
it was
fair.
around January-ish. I'll have to look.
Okay, so I'm 10 years old by this point. So because I'm a much more of a sissy in comparison to Caleb, I would have definitely probably been afraid by them. But those mannequins and the Resident Evil 8 DLC, those things, those things are like the Weeping Angels, by the way. And this anyway.
Actually, it was 26th of March, 2005.
Still 10 years old. My cousin would have been 11. They actually remind me of not in the face, but just because they're mannequins and pseudo robotic. They kind of remind me of the THX droids, whatever you want to call it. And if anyone's played Alien Isolation, they also remind me of the Working Joes. You always know a Working Joe. Sorry.
What they always reminded me of retroactively was I don't know which I saw. Well, I probably saw this first before I saw this type of creature in Doctor Who, but they always reminded me of the sort of androids in either the movie, Westworld or Future World. I don't know if you're familiar with those old films from the 70s.
I've seen Westworld. I know of Future World, not seen it.
Well, Westworld's the better one,
yes,
but they're very similar to each other. And the Autons always kind of reminded me of those androids in Westworld.
By the ending, not to go straight to the ending, but when they're inside the big arena and big set,
yes.
It made me think of, and this is not fair to it, but it made me think of one of those stunt shows at Universal Studios. The whole set just screamed of that. I'm like, okay, where's the audience? Where's avoid the splash zone? Yeah. Where's all that? Just you can clearly see the flame shoot out from where the handrails are. I'm like, okay, this is clearly I'm not throwing it under the bus. And then there's the TARDIS. They just reveal, we have the TARDIS. It's funny. And then there's where Rose, she's I'm a bronze in gymnastics or whatever, and swings in to save the day. It just by that point I was like, oh, this really is just like a big set piece. And the music as well. The music was, again, of the times, obviously, but it was very kind of not. Maybe not. I don't. I forget the music of. Well, the music of Austin Powers' play on James Bond, but it just felt like a pseudo 60s / maybe Charlie's Angels, like, like slappy action or something like that.
Yeah.
All over the place.
Yeah. I know Caleb was not a fan of it. And notably, like, if you had watched more of the new series, especially season 1 and maybe season 2 or series 2 of New Doctor Who, they don't have a real orchestra. So, it's all produced like on a synthesizer, etc. Some sort of soundboard. But then possibly series 3 is when, even though it's the same composer, we start to get actual orchestrations. So that's something that always stands out to me in the first season or two, is how it's purely digital at this point. And of course, in the classic show, whether it was the 60s, 70s, or 80s, practically never orchestrations and always digitally created music as well, except digital meant something different in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, but still not with real instruments. So that, in a weird way, that's keeping in line with the old show.
Both the set of these autons, is that what they're called? Forgive me.
Autons, yeah. Like autonomous people, autons.
Autonomous people, yeah. I just didn't know how to, because I want to say automatons, but just autons.
Mm-hmm.
And then like the street outside the shopping center
Mm-hmm.
with all the garbage, like, just the whole chaos. I'm assuming that's just like the budget, and we're not going to see that level of detail in the next step. Okay, maybe different. Obviously, what they showcase in the preview, it's a little different, but they would only probably do that for like the first episode, and then save that for later.
I know what you're saying, because that was especially common in television back then, including American television, live action. I will say it really just depends if we're watching more new Doctor Who. It really depends more if it's the kind of episode that's filmed like on location, like in real cities or whatever, versus alien planets, alien locations. Because if a story happens to take place on Earth present day, then it's kind of going to be the same level of detail, to be honest, if it's that kind of story. If it's an alien world or historical time period, then it could be either or. It could be heavily studio, or it could be a mixture of studio and live location. So it just kind of depends on what kind of story we're watching. By and large, especially when it takes place in a contemporary setting, they will continue to have this type of budget or detail, however you want to phrase it. It's not going to only be this episode. For myself, of course, I wasn't scared in 2005. But if I had seen this and I had been more your age at the time, like 10 or 9 or something like that, I wouldn't have been scared out of my mind, or like covering my eyes or hiding behind the couch, as they say. I wouldn't have been at that level, just because I was exposed to extremely scary things from the youngest age possible. So it wouldn't have scared me in that way. But I could definitely imagine, even though I was already kind of used to really scary things, I definitely could imagine the tension, at the very least, with these autons if I saw this around that age. And I do have the memories of watching classic Doctor Who when I was 5, 6, 7, 8. And a lot of things in those episodes when I was that age that are not scary at all if I watch them right now. But a lot of those were super creepy when I was 5, 6, 7 years old. But I think I would have been different, though, by the time I was 9 or 10.
I'm trying to remember. There was a Twilight Zone episode Rod Sterling's 60s Twilight Zone episode that had mannequins in it, and that still puts the shivers and puts the hair up on the back of my neck.
I don't remember the mannequin episode, but I definitely remember the marionette episode. and that one is definitely creepy, no matter how old you are, because just on a psychological level, it's creepy.
Oh, is that the Talking Tina one?
No, it was like this person who was doing like a live performer, like sort of like stand up or like how people use mannequins for live shows now. It was kind of like that.
Oh, ventriloquism or
Yes,
oh
yes.
yeah, what's his name? Yeah, he was in 2 episodes. He showed up in it was one of the rare like recurring. I say recurring theme, but the fall like he was followed up on. He actually had a second episode like later on down the line.
Yeah, yeah. What do you think of Rose? Like, if you're imagining, I'm going to tune into this show every week. Do you want to see more of her as the season or series progresses? Or is it just like, oh, I would have been more into a different type of companion or whatever?
Well, she's. I love the speech that he gives to her about like he takes her hand for the first not the first time. He takes her hand as he's going to the TARDIS with the mannequin hand. Sorry, the Auton hand, and he describes the speed they're going at on the Earth. He can feel all of that,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought that was a very memorable line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the Doctor has a lot of memorable lines just in this one episode like that. But in Doctor Who in general, especially when I think, if we're just talking New Who, but of course this applies to Classic Who, but there's a lot of good lines throughout New Who. There's a lot of corny lines too,
Well, of course.
but ones that are like that, yeah, there's quite a few that come along the way. I really liked when he was saying things like that. And what do you think about the way the Doctor in this almost speaks in a like a demeaning or dehumanizing way about humans in general? Because he does it more than once in this episode.
Well, first, let me just answer your question before. I'm not drawing a blank on Rose herself. That's not fair to her nor the actor. What I was trying to get at is see, they can't do this, but had they, I'm not wanting this, obviously, because they have the conceit, obviously, at the end. Her mom's fine, her boyfriend's fine, but then she just up and leaves once she hears the Doctor say, oh, did I also mention that this is a time machine?
Yeah.
So you can basically show up at the exact same spot and leave your boyfriend temporarily.
Yes.
I'm not saying we should have had the Autons kill both her boyfriend and her mother. I don't want
Wow.
that, but well, see, I know how bloodthirsty and ruthless I am and cold-hearted I am. I don't want that, but because and this is maybe a common thing in Britain. I've heard these lines before, and I mean, this is just beyond just this like British writing, but the Doctor kind of describes Rose as, you get up, you go to work, you eat, you go back to the flat, lather, rinse, repeat. And I don't know if I felt that with her yet necessarily. I don't know if I got that sense of,
You mean that she's just a regular person? Is that what you mean?
yeah, she's just regular. Like I don't know if I ever feel that there's like a mundanity that she wants to get out of the system and she wants to get out of reality, not reality, but the world itself. I'm not, because I get what he's trying to say. Like she is literally like, yeah, she's a normal person. She works at a clothing store or department store where I guess her uniform is her regular clothes. That was interesting. Maybe that was just the symbolism or at least the connection that she.
Wait, why is that interesting? Does everyone wear uniforms in department stores in Canada these days?
I guess it depends, but then again, I haven't really gone to. Well, you know what? Maybe they don't. Maybe they just wear formal attire and then they have like a pin or like a name tag, and that's about it. But I didn't see a name tag on her. And maybe I'm just wrong on that. Anyways, depends on the store, of course.
Of course.
Well, yeah, if you go to like a really high end suit store or something like that, you're gonna have a lot of the employees working there actually dressed in.
It might be because, I restarted the episode. It might be because she's not really a sales associate. She's kind of just like a restocker.
Oh, okay. I guess that's fair.
That might be the reason why she's dressed more informally.
Okay, that's a good point. My point is that I don't really know this character other than what's thrust upon her. Like, you know,
Right.
first 3 minutes, boy, that zips by. You know, we see her working the department store, as you said, as restocking the shelves. And then we go see, like, on her lunch break, she goes to see her boyfriend. They have a believable relationship. But then after that, like, within the first 5 minutes, I think, you know, in the almost 5 minute mark, that's when the Autons attack. Obviously, that's to get the ball rolling. I get that. So I don't really have she's kind of bored with this place. Like, she
Understood. She may not be
doesn't have the Belle moment of, I want something more than this provincial town.
certainly not necessarily, but we still get an early read like on maybe what her personality is like, and you know she's obviously seemingly a very regular girl for her age.
Yep.
But you know they could have got someone who's precocious or someone who seems like nerdy or geeky, or could have been a guy. You know, a lot of different ways they could have gone.
That's not to say Piper doesn't, you know, act in this. I literally just don't. I don't know if the script gives her enough to act. So she's still, by the end of it, for me, like, other than, like, there is, I guess, a bit of adventure that she's kind of thrust into it. She has an adventurous call, but by the end, I still think she's a little bit of a blank slate, not bland necessarily, just blank slate.
Yeah. Of course,
Yeah.
we just met her. Of course, even the doctor himself just met her. You know, it makes sense. Oh, and what was the thing I had just asked before you won?
Oh, right, the Eccleston, right?
Oh, yeah, the way he seems to, you know, he's, for lack of any better term, comes across as really elitist, like better than human in a way.
Okay, thank you. That was the word I was thinking of. So I don't know if this is a legacy thing. I say legacy, but they were like, okay, obviously do your own thing with this, other than maybe the dialogue we read. I don't know how much is ad-libbed or what he brings to the role. And or like, because I was thinking, okay, I still go back to what's it called? I go back to Hartnell in Unearthly Child and how much of a different take he had, even though I've not seen anything else, but just hear that, you know, this doctor character is supposed to be whimsical throughout the other doctors that are portrayed in his reincarnations. And that one was a sourpuss and like a sour old man, almost in a way.
Yeah.
Is not misanthropic in a way, but there's a he's I don't want to say damage is the wrong word, but there's definitely world weariness to him, and he came across as just a man running. How funny is it that he was a man running when he has a time machine and the ability to teleport anywhere? That's pretty like he was always on the run for somewhere, like he's trying to avoid something from his past. And that's it's kind of also, I guess, like talked about in here as well. But there was this sort of like, I'm reading I know I'm in a show, like there's I don't know if I got to be careful how I say, I don't know if this was the case in like the previous series and our portrayals of, I know what show I'm in, or I know what, like, I'm in not fully Deadpool, of course, maybe leaning on that fourth wall potentially. But he did have some early quips. He warmed up to Rose later on. Maybe it's because she has like a good, like that, you know, adventurous personality when he says, I don't know if it's like an indebted thing or he's just like, oh, she actually does have like some spunk to her and pep.
Fair enough. It's only one story each, but if you knew you only had the choice to watch, like, let's say a season or two with the Hartnell Doctor, his character, the way he is, or the Eccleston Doctor, which one do you think you would find more appealing? Forget about the fact that one's, you know, 60s production standards and 2000 or mid-aughts. Forget about that part. Just based on the character, like if you were reading this all in novel form, would you rather read a bunch more novels with this Eccleston type of doctor or the Hartnell?
Hartnell, 100%, because he's less physical.
Okay.
It was very weird to see, like, boy, there were some quick cuts in this show, but it wasn't totally, you could see it. It was just very weird. They were quick cutting. I was like, whoa, that was very weird. But it was just interesting to see he had a headlock in one of them. like that's the other thing with Eccleston. So I've seen him in 2 roles, I think, outside of this, which is obviously the like 100% forgettable. Everybody hates that movie
I don't hate
except
it.
for me. Thor: The Dark World as Malekith,
Yes.
the Dark Elf.
I don't hate the movie, but I hate that Christopher Eccleston as an actor was underutilized.
Oh, absolutely.
That's the one thing I really don't like, but I like the movie overall.
That movie is also, I think, severely like cut down from what it could have been. But anyway, and then the other thing he was in G.I. Joe from 2009.
Oh, I don't remember him. I saw that movie probably at the theater.
I've seen it once. It was, I don't remember where it was. It wasn't in the theater, but I remember seeing it once.
Yes, I only saw it once myself, but now I can't recall Eccleston being in it.
So I don't want to say he's like, okay, when I say this, like, the guy is probably very charming, very friendly, but he definitely has a sort of intimidation factor to him. I don't know how tall he is. I think over 6 feet at least, but he kind of gives me like some. When I say this, I just mean like Tom Hardy intimidations, almost like I could see this guy playing
Tom
Bane.
Hardy.
Yeah, Tom
Because
Hardy.
he is an intimidating fellow on screen.
Oh, he is. No, I've seen him do jiu-jitsu. Love to roll with him. That'd be cool. But like Eccleston looks like he is not thuggish, not brutish or anything like that, but he definitely looks like he's had formal training of some sort, and he does seem like he would be very physical. Just in the way of not handsy. Sorry, I don't mean that way, but he definitely feels like you could see him like throw some punches.
Yeah, he's much more of an action man, certainly. If you compare him to Hartnell, especially.
Like once I started, like I've seen the like roster of, or not the roster, but the legacy of the Doctor himself, and from Hartnell and then through all the other guys to Eccleston and then Tennant and so on and so forth. Eccleston always stood out for me. He always seemed like the one that I don't want to like call him out for like, oh, it's typecasting. Just he did not strike me as a guy who would play a doctor, but maybe that's the whole point of like, you don't always have to have like and he's probably a gentleman, of course, but just, I don't know, he just never struck me as like, you look at Tennant, no, Tennant doesn't look like he'd ever throw a punch in his life, even though he's quite a force to be reckoned with in Goblet of Fire. I'll say that. I say force.
Oh, yeah.
Because his performance is, as a deranged madman in that says otherwise.
Yeah, no one can lick his teeth like David Tennant in Goblet of Fire.
Oh, yeah, I guess the same year. But yeah, with Eccleston, I don't know, like I warmed up to him by the end, but definitely there I don't know if it's legacy writing or it's just the new take on him, writing take wise, not just Eccleston himself. But yeah, there was just, I don't know, there was something about Hartnell. Just I wanted to know more. He, like I said, is a person who is running from something. Something has happened, and he has the ability to go anywhere in time. Sorry for repeating myself. And he insists on kind of isolating himself even from contact with others. He's just like so wanting to be to himself for reasons that I actually want to know as to why. But
So you're not curious about this iteration, about why he?
Not really. Like
because even from this, even though it's only 45 minutes, we do get the idea that he's probably been alone for a bit. And if you were brand new to this character, one might be wondering, why is he traveling around by himself?
I suspect that and maybe this is, one thing that I didn't like was with thinking as this is a show for Unearthly Child. I don't know if they had an entire season written out, if they only had one episode and then say, all right, well, we'll get to the next one eventually, but we have no, like, there's no plan. We don't have like an entire season's worth of stuff. We're just going episode by episode. I don't know how that worked. They
probably had like, 5 or 10 in the can, but certainly not like a whole plan for a season or anything like that.
Avatar: The Last Airbender has definitely like ruined my perceptions of how to do television, because you don't always have to do that. You shouldn't. But
you mean be like Airbender?
Just because that show had 3 seasons in mind, and then that was it. There was nothing else like after that. Obviously, we're getting a film later on. An animated film later on this year or next year. I forget.
Oh yeah, I
But
just heard about that.
the point is that starts off with a kid thawing out from an iceberg to him fighting against the tyrannical dictator of the world and that is causing the war. That happened within 3 years, right? That was all planned from the start.
Right.
And everything in between obviously was plans mixed between like, okay, we have broad strokes of what we want to do versus, okay, well, now we'll actually sit down and in the middle of all this, we'll write these episodes. This has that where I assume the showrunners know where this is all going. So they have like mysteries to him, and they have this guy, very like charming fellow. Don't get me wrong. Definitely is not one of the guy out of his like mom's basement, but suddenly has like a whole conspiracy of like, oh, we've seen this doctor before on the day the pilot aired of Unearthly Child, or the day Unearthly Child aired, he was there.
The day it was supposed to air.
Sorry, thank you. You're right.
But because that happened, they had to air it the following day.
Funny enough, that he's there back then. I guess I don't know if it's ever brought up again, but I guess it's enough for her to just, I guess have more intrigue into, oh, this guy's like, who is this guy exactly? Alien or whatever. But yeah, I'm not sure. Like that whole part, I was like, oh, it kind of seems like typical of the times conspiracy, and you'd see that maybe in, I don't know, Lost or in 24.
Yeah. Certainly when this was produced and came out, that was a to be expected thing in this type of genre television in general. Did you ever watch before Buffy the series or Smallville the series?
I saw like a few episodes of Smallville, the one that had Iceman in it.
Right, I remember that one. I'm pretty sure that's season 1.
Oh, I guess I've seen the pilot as well. But for Buffy, I don't think because I got the CW. I don't think this, or whatever it was called before CW, WB, whatever it was.
I think Buffy was on Fox originally.
I cannot recall, because I did get Fox, because I got 4 kids, TV. I cannot recall ever seeing Buffy on cable TV.
It's fine. Either way, those are 2 series that already existed that certainly RTD stated, he was going for those types of shows, but of course Doctor Who. But it was always obvious to me, being a fan of both of those shows before I saw this, it was very obvious to me how it was very Buffy-like in a lot of ways.
So you're saying that this also has its roots in Night of the Comet. Got it. Okay, good. Glad we came full circle.
Sure, why not?
To connect all our shows together. Our podcasts together, excuse me.
But yeah, because I was a fan of both of those prior to this, it definitely made sense. Like I could feel it. Yeah, this is going for that type of show. And I mean, even if you're familiar with any of the Arrowverse programs.
Oh boy, was I ever.
I mean, they're just, in that long line of this lineage of these types of shows.
Yep.
So, it is in a way like that. They're all related loosely, even though they vary in quality and whatnot and execution, but they're still kind of using the same model.
In terms of like either cinematography or location shooting, I definitely like enjoyed the stuff outside. When I say outside, excuse me, but whenever they were filming, I guess on location. Just the scene right now that I'm watching is just the Doctor explaining stuff before he gives the whole like, I can feel the world speech, and they're just walking down the street in like a one take almost. I kind of enjoy this stuff. I am enjoying the on location shooting.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a fan of that in general, especially in British programming, because in the United States, especially in the 80s and 90s, if they were outdoors, it was always the same outdoors, Southern California or Canada, like always. So that gets kind of old with standard American television back in the day. But especially with European productions in general, I remember when Amazon like Prime Video was a relatively new thing, and when Netflix started producing more original content for streaming series. I remember something I noticed then that you wouldn't see on network television usually at that same time frame, which was because in American television, circa when was all this happening? Like around 2015. American television, circa 2015, whenever they shot on location, it always seemed like a backlot at Disney Studios or Universal or something, or frequently. And if they weren't shooting like actually on the street in New York City, it just felt like it was some studio backlot in California or Canada. But I remember when the streaming series were starting to become a thing on Prime and Netflix, they would have these shows that were shot on location, and especially if it was outside of North America. Like I remember there was the series called Hannah, which was based off the movie of the same name, and it was streaming on Prime, and it largely shot in and around like Eastern Europe and other places on location in cities in that region. And I remember just because they're just shooting on location in these European cities I'm not very familiar with, it made the show look incredibly high budget and like really cinematic, because you would never see something like that in a standard network show at the time. I used to watch Alias a lot in the early aughts, and in that show, because of the premise, they would frequently travel internationally. Like, oh, they're in Berlin. Oh, they're in Saudi Arabia. But it always looked like a Disney backlot to me. Like, I never thought, oh, yeah, they're really in the Middle East. Like, no way. But seeing shows like Hannah, and what's funny is that when I was, getting accustomed to watching those kind of shows and being like amazed by the visuals, it's funny because when, from a television production point of view, it's actually cost effective for them to be shooting in places like Hungary and Czechoslovakia. So it's actually a budget saver, but yet it makes the product look more expensive, if you know what I mean. But I always appreciated that with Doctor Who and British television in general. If you've watched it through the decades like I have, like even regular sitcoms and regular dramas and things, they frequently shoot outdoors on location. And I always liked it because it was just real, because it wouldn't always be London. It could be this small town here, that small town there, and it just looked real. And we probably mentioned this during the Unearthly Child conversation, but another funny thing about Doctor Who especially, but it was the same for American programs and other British programs back in the day, but especially in Classic Doctor Who, because in Classic Doctor Who, no matter what episode or whatever you're watching, if they were shooting on a set, they would use video cameras. But if they were shooting on location, they would use 16 millimeter film cameras. And so you could always tell, like if they're inside a building or the TARDIS or whatever, you could tell it was shot on video. And then as soon as they step out the door, it would switch to 16 millimeter film, and you'd just be like, what? Like, what just happened? And when I was a kid, I didn't know why that was happening in Doctor Who and other shows. But I used to always wonder, why does everything look different whenever they step outside? But it's because they're literally using different film stock. If you had just caught this in 2005 and you had no idea what Doctor Who was, but you were the age you were, would you want to continue tuning into this show?
Thinking of everything I just said about how this is very like action driven and less like obviously Isaac of 2005 would not watch Unearthly Child. He would think it's pretty boring.
Well, I'm not talking about An Earthly Child.
I know. I'm just thinking of like myself as well. Again, I'm thinking like, okay, because if I'm watching Zix at that point, I feel like I'd have to give this a chance because and Blue and Galador as well. I think I should give this a chance because it's also live action, and I like Star Wars at that point as well, and that's live action. So what and this is very like all right, next scene, next scene, next scene, rather than like kind of stopping. Well, except for the part where we're talking conspiracy talk. That's the only part where we're kind of like slow down.
Would you say you had like a shorter attention span for media when in 2005 in general?
See, I could read books. I know it sounds stupid, but it's just like what? I could focus on something, but I wasn't at the point of devoting myself to watching live action shows week to week like I was with, say, Arrow. Like, that was the first one that I was watching. Okay, maybe not the first one, but that was one of the first ones.
That's interesting to have a first series that you watched on a regular basis, Arrow.
Yeah, no, that was the one.
Especially because it seems so recent to me, even though I know it was a while back.
Yeah, you'd think that. And then after that, like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. or Revolution as well was one of those that I was also like by that point, it's like, okay, now I've like graduated from school, even though you couldn't watch anything like that. I saw the ending of Lost and it made no sense to me because I didn't watch the first few seasons at all.
Well, trust me, even if you watch the first few seasons, it still doesn't make very much sense. The finale.
Like, I would watch, whatever my mom was watching on TV back then, like, The Office, or 30 Rock or Ugly Betty, those shows, but I wouldn't, when I say watch, just whatever was on, she was watching, I would just also just like, sit there and just watch what she's watching.
Well, certainly people my age, we had no other choice when we were younger, but to watch what our parents or the adults in the room would watch. Okay, another hypothetical question.
Well, hang on. Sorry. So the answer, I think, is no. Just to say, I don't think
because you weren't ready for this type of live action.
Oh, I was dumber than a doornail.
That's nothing to do with intelligence, but just your preferences or what gets your attention. Okay.
Any explosions, even though there's explosions at the end.
Another hypothetical. Let's say Isaac present day.
Yep.
Let's pretend the classic series didn't exist. Let's pretend the series started in 2005 just as you saw it.
Well, I would have thought that actually.
Okay, but let's just pretend. So it's present day Isaac. The classic series never existed. The only thing you know going in is that this show came out in 2005. A lot of people and friends say it's pretty good if you watch it. So that's all you know. And you're watching it, the exact same thing produced in 2005, but you're watching it 2025. You just know people said it is good. And you just watched the first episode. Do you think you want to watch more?
Wait, so this current scenario or...
So we're in 2025. You're watching this exactly the same. It was produced in 2005. Right. You know that. You know it's existed. You know people and friends have watched it already and they quite like it. Right. So you're stepping into it. The only thing that's changing is that the classic series never existed. So do you think you'd stick with it?
No.
To see why other people like it?
No.
Why is that?
Because there's a billion other programs that also could either have my attention or might seem more interesting to me. Not that this wasn't interesting, but just...
What's an example of a show, follow-up question?
Yep.
What's an example of a show that has already been out or whatever that people like that you have not seen but you think you would have a better chance of liking if you were going to jump into it now?
Battlestar Galactica revival.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else besides that?
Deep Space Nine.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, those are good choices. Okay. That's fair enough. Anything that's not sci-fi that you've heard people talk about,
I guess Game of Thrones, but I have an embargo on that, so...
Oh, you haven't watched that?
And then Firefly, I also have an embargo that will never... Yeah, I guess I'm going to the grave not watching that one.
With Game of Thrones, have you read it at all?
Nope.
Okay. You can tell me off air what your embargo is about in case...
Of course.
Maybe you told me before and I forgot.
No. I've never revealed what the embargoes are.
But I could guess, even if you've never told me.
Knowing me, yes.
Okay. But okay. Yeah. Cuz circa 2005 for stuff that was like sort of current, if you will, like not things that had already been out or from the past. I want to say that this and Battlestar Galactica: The Revival were my favorite sci-fi shows circa 2005 of current like running shows. And I had seen Firefly on disc circa 2003, and I immensely loved that. Even though it's only like 14 episodes, I had watched that whole thing over on disc multiple times. Like as soon as I bought it, watched it. I never caught it on television when it was briefly on television, but I got that disc because I think I bought it because I started watching Buffy. Because I started watching Buffy when it was already like nearing the end, but that's when I started watching it. And I really liked Buffy, and I heard he had something to do with this Firefly show. So then I bought that and watched it, and oh my god! So that would have been my triumvirate in 2005 of my favorite current sci-fi, if you consider Firefly current, even though it was like 3 years older already by that time. Yeah, those are probably my favorite sci-fi television without going into the classics, like Star Trek, etc., etc.
Can I also like ask, or can I also add animation or no?
Sure, go ahead.
Well, then a bunch of classic anime like Outlaw Star. What's that one that's similar to Evangelion? Can't remember that one. I still have Trigun to watch. There's a lot of like animations that I'd rather watch over live action TV.
You know, I was big into anime and animation, or let's say anime, starting in the early 90s. And I was still into it like at the beginning of the aughts. But I wasn't into it like those live action shows I just named. I was definitely way more into that than the anime stuff I had dabbled in. But yeah. Anything else you want to say about this episode before we get into rating it and such?
Oh, the CGI.
Oh yeah, I forgot. I was going to ask about the effects in general and stuff like that.
Right. That's fair. Even though I already gave a whole spiel on the end set piece or room. What is it? So Caleb's going to have editor's notes to me afterwards, and he's going to, come up with a lot of rebuttals. Him listening to this already to edit it. And I'm going to say this, and again, he's going to have no mouth and he wants to scream. I think the CGI works for this. Like, it is clearly like TV CGI, but I think just for the fact that it's supposed to be alien, I think, and it may take you out. I think that's the point. I think the sudden like appearance of when boyfriend, I forget his name, sorry, touches the garbage can, and it turns into like a mimic. And it like, I don't know how they did that effect. Where this also, the Autons also reminded me of like Clayface mimics in a way, and mimics.
Are you talking about the effect when he's sort of taken over or possessed? Is that what you're talking about?
We'll get to that in a second, but when the garbage can itself, or sorry, rubbish bin, pardon me, is like he's stuck to it, and he tries to pull himself off, but it's still extended, like he's caught in like a spider web. I think this all works, even if it is noticeable and obvious and unfinished CGI, because I think it's supposed to look either alien or look uncanny and unsettling, and that's the point. So it's like, oh, it's like, obscene. It's like abhorrent. It's like, don't look at it. And that's the point. I think that's what they're going for. And I think that works there. And then when the boyfriend becomes, Barbie doll or a Ken doll, I don't know how they did that, but it definitely looked uncanny. But again, I like that effect of, oh no, that's the point. I think they're trying to make us be. It is a little like, okay, she definitely rolled like a nat 1 on perception check. Because it's like, clearly he looks very, unless it's just to our eyes, he's Ken doll.
Well, to us, it looks clear, but I also think it's for, because they're trying to get 10-year-olds and 12-year-olds into this, and they want to make it obvious, I think, to them, like, where if it was an adult, or made for an adult audience, you wouldn't have to make it so obvious visually.
Yeah, and how did they do that to the actor, by the way, to make him a Ken doll? Was it just like a lot of glycerin or something?
Yeah, it's heavy makeup, I believe.
Oh, man.
When I was looking at it today, and even though I've seen it a billion times, like his hair, like his sideburns, etc., it looked to me like there was some sort of, I don't know what it was made out of, but something that was like, like paper or something applied. It looked like something flat and two-dimensional
Waxy.
was like pasted onto his scalp to make his hair look the way it looks. Like it's not natural hair. It looks to me like it's something pasted on.
Yeah.
And then, just incredible amount of makeup like on his skin, etc. And the CG for like the bin sticking to him and enveloping, I think that was like sort of like standard CGI morphing technology for this time, especially for television or on a television budget. One thing I've always noticed interesting about this show from like a resolution point of view is that even though this is produced in SD originally, it was produced by the British standard of PAL as opposed to the North American NTSC. So they're both SD formats that had existed since the beginning of television. But what I always noticed and thought about was PAL programming basically is always, I think it's 525 lines of resolution horizontally. And NTSC, the North American standard, is 480. And so since the dawn of television, PAL stuff always has like slightly better resolution. And once you couldn't tell on a DVD, but on a Blu-ray, you could always tell that even if it was SD, that British stuff just always looked a little bit better on Blu-ray than American stuff. And you can really tell nowadays with high definition streaming and whatnot, you can tell this looks better than regular SD, even though it's not HD. But if you were to watch this back in the day on a standard television, especially like a not HD television, if you watched it broadcast or if you watched it on DVD, this stuff looks excellent on a regular CRT television. Even on DVD, it looked really good. It's just if you watch the DVD on a modern big flat screen, then it looked like garbage. I always found it almost unwatchable on DVD specifically for that reason. But yeah, I think it holds up well. And fortunately, even though American programs were already getting produced in the 16:9 format at this point, Europe started doing it earlier. So I'm glad that British shows or some shows were already being produced in 16:9 ahead of time, so that 20 years later we don't have to see them with any type of black bars or anything like that at the sides. Always appreciate that. And if you notice the televisions that you see in the show, like in their homes and whatnot, and you would notice it on any British shows or European shows or movies of these days, you'll notice that even though they have CRT televisions, normal for 2005, you'll notice that they're all 16:9. Whereas 16:9 CRT televisions in the US, while they did exist back then, they were quite rare. But I always appreciated that the Europeans adopted that aspect ratio before we did. Yeah, so that's Doctor Who and Rose. Unit of measure I'm going to go with...
Anti-plastic.
I didn't remember what it was called, but I was going to say test tubes of blue liquid.
Where did he get it from? Doesn't matter. Bootstrap paradox. No, I'm just kidding. Sorry.
It's not a bootstrap, but it definitely doesn't matter.
Yep. He just asked.
How many blue test tubes of anti-plastic out of 5 would you rate Rose?
Did we rate Unearthly Child? I forget.
I assume we did because we pretty much always do, especially on MHC.
Yeah, I don't know what I gave it.
But for Unearthly Child, we probably rated all 4 as a whole, not individually.
Would you like me to go first?
Sure, go ahead.
I will give this out of 5. Yeah, I'll give it a 3.5 out of 5 anti-plastic jars, beakers, bottles, vials, whatever you want to call it.
Sure.
For something that is very action-packed, doesn't get into character stuff, but there's no problem with that. To you, Eric, your rating for this.
So I don't know that I've ever officially rated it on this podcast or any other before. If I had, I've forgotten, but I don't think we've ever done a Rose specific episode on this podcast. But that being said, there's no way I'll be able to subtract the 2005 nostalgia I have, the remembering of me being so excited that the show was coming back in modern times, and just as its significance in the whole grand scheme of NuWho and Doctor Who in general. So I will just simply give it a 4 out of 5. But know this, Isaac, and anyone hearing my voice, Rose, the episode in particular, has never been one of my favorite episodes of Doctor Who or NuWho or anything like that. I mean, there's plenty of better episodes with Billy Piper or Christopher Eccleston or whatever else you want to say. So just because I give it 4 out of 5, don't think it's because I especially love this episode. It's just more of the context where I was in time in 2005 and in the whole grand scheme of things. You know, this has a big job, you know, trying to reintroduce the show, you know, and while simultaneously avoid being canceled in the first year, et cetera, et cetera. So with all the context involved, that's why I give it a 4 out of 5. And one thing last of note, I wonder what you think about this factoid. So when they were producing this episode, RTD wanted to get a certain director to direct it, but he was unavailable because he was working on Shaun of the Dead at the time. What would you have thought, or what do you think if Edgar Wright would have been able to direct this episode?
Did he ever direct anything afterwards, a part of Doctor Who?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Well, that's fair. Asking Isaac of 2025, yeah, I would have definitely loved to have seen what he could have done with this.
That would have been phenomenal. And, you know, if he wasn't working on that movie, it probably would have happened, I imagine. Yeah. Oh, and before we go, what did you think about seeing the inside of the TARDIS in this episode?
Yeah, definitely different than the 60s. I kind of like the 60s version more, but not saying this one was crap. It was just like, oh, different. Different is not bad. Preference.
Of course, I liked it in the way it looked here. And of course, this is the first time we ever saw it look like that, you know, in this episode. But one thing I never quite liked about this version, even though I like it, many people often said that the sort of columns or whatever they are on the inside kind of look like they're coral or something. Coral-esque. Yeah, I never liked that bit. That was something I didn't really like. But in general, of course, yeah, I like it. But
it looks like the inside of something Nikola Tesla would have designed.
Oh, yeah, I can see that.
Where just I could see electric arcs jumping from point to point.
I would say yes, it could be like something by Nikola Tesla, but what would make it different or distinguish it from something like that, I think, for me, is two things. One is that this looks a little more steampunky, and also, besides steampunk, there is an element which some people really like, and I'm not saying I like or dislike it. There is a sense with this one that it's sort of organic and, almost like grown as opposed to like manufactured.
Yeah, I'd maybe go more atom punk than steam, but
You said atom punk?
atom. So Fallout.
Oh, atom.
Yeah.
What does that mean? I've heard of the different punks, but I don't know that I'm familiar with atom.
Yeah, of course. We've had this conversation. Don't worry, I'm not gonna go. I was anal about that before. But the atom aesthetic is more, Fallout, for instance. I mean, I think that's diesel punk, but I'm just thinking of we don't see any like pneumatic tubes, but there's just something of like, oh, I can kind of see this if this was like an alternate 50s or something pulpy from the 50s.
I see that too, but it also still has something, even if it was the 50s or whatever, it still has something that looks a little grungy or, again, like almost organic than manufactured.
You know what? I also thought of it. It looks like the inside of Dr. Frankenstein's lab.
From Young Frankenstein?
Well, okay, I guess I said it incorrectly, but just think of a Frankenstein movie, and then the inside of that, I don't know what Del Toro's is going to look like, but that's just when he's creating the creature. Yeah, it looks like maybe like that.
Okay. Oh yeah, and Del Toro definitely has a way of his like set pieces to look sort of like.
Ooh, maybe that's also what I'm thinking of. Maybe it's got a bit of Del Toro to it as well.
In a little bit, because his things do look kind of like punky mixed with organic, so to speak.
So sort of Giger-esque.
In a loose sense, I could see that.
Well, I also don't mean to. I don't mean that to Del Toro, but I also mean to the TARDIS, because when I think of machine organic, well, Giger.
Yeah. I mean, definitely. If you're talking about something that looks machine-like / organic, that is what his art looks like. There's no question about that.
Maybe there's a bit of Alien Resurrection in here. I'm just kidding.
Maybe in some other episodes of Who, we'll see things that feel more like the Alien franchise.
To be fair, yeah. Give me this. This is the only time I've seen like the inside of this thing for this episode. So going forward, then I'll have a better call or judgment call on that.
Sure. Yeah. Now, of course, next time when it's you and I on MHC, we're going to go back to 1963 in our little podcast TARDIS, and we will pick up where we left off with William Hartnell, and we will jump into the story called The Daleks. And I can't remember now I don't remember if it's a 6 or 8-parter.
Good grief.
So that'll be a lot of, even though they're 22 minutes, it's still a lot.
Better start writing notes.
So, are you looking forward to jumping back to 63?
No, of course. Just like, oh yeah, I forgot how long that's going to take. A few sessions at least.
Yeah, it'll be a big one. And so, yeah, that's what we shall return, at least myself and Isaac. And do you have any anticipation to return to Rose and Christopher Eccleston and see what they get into after this episode?
Favorably for the show, yes. Maybe not on my own time, but I don't say that with any spite. I don't say that with any spite nor negativity. Just, yeah, we'll see how it goes. I'm more.
But you're more into the 60s stuff right now.
Just the tone. That's really it. I'm more into the and it's again looking into a window of the past. Hopefully, I'm not sounding like I'm straight out of Midnight in Paris, but
okay. Bonus Easter egg right now, but even though they're very different from each other, do you see any association with like the style and tone of the black and white Doctor Who and let's just say the original Sterling Twilight Zone?
With this episode of Rose?
No, not Rose. An Unearthly Child.
Oh yes, because we had kind of a off the record conversation about that, right?
Sure, but I mean, do you see them existing like in the same television universe? You know, not the story or anything like that, but I mean, just
you know what? I could, but
just the way the presentation is.
I actually would love to have seen, this never would have happened, but I actually would have loved to see, maybe it happened, I don't know, if what Rod Sterling would have done if he had an episode to his name for Doctor Who. That would have been flippin' cool. Maybe he has one. I should go back and start watching Twilight Zone. I say to watch him.
I'm pretty sure he doesn't have one, but there are definitely particular stories that have more of that kind of Twilight Zone feel. Like, I mean, like thematically or whatever.
As you said, yeah, because it's mostly an anthology series, Twilight Zone, excuse me. And this also is that as well, except we have a guide, a through line through the each story.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, there will be certain issues and quandaries eventually the Doctor will encounter that kind of have that Twilight Zone mysticism to them, like that surreal world, or conundrums that you kind of only encounter in that way in the Twilight Zone.
I'll say like, let me watch a few more episodes to make my choice on that one, but you're leaning me in the direction of, yes, it could almost exist in the same universe, even though I don't consider it that same way of Twilight Zone.
But I mean by like tonal universe, I mean like pacing, storytelling, acting. That's more what I meant.
Like it's well written. Like I still think that first episode's very well written, so it's on the level of a.
Well, yeah, the first one, especially if you say episode.
I say
story as a whole. That's a different conversation in my mind, but
whatever it's called. Well, that whole like part, that whole chat, whatever it's called, I don't care. The whole Unearthly Child 4 parts together, I think it's all worthy of a good Twilight Zone episode, just in 4 parts instead of 1 or 30 minutes.
Fair enough. We can discuss that more next time when we get into the Daleks. So, yeah, I definitely hope we continue onward and go far in both the 60s and the mid-aughts for Doctor Who. But only time will tell, because it takes a long time, just because it's not just a Doctor Who thing. It's because, we do Star Trek stuff, we do movie stuff, so there's always so much on the table. But we'll definitely get back to it, I'm sure. So, closing out the show today, this is Eric.
I was Isaac.
And until next time,
this was the weirdest Harlem Shake fashion show, whatever you want to call it, that I witnessed.
And don't panic.
Hello and welcome to the secret bonus section, Caleb's Corner. I think I was titling it back when I was doing this on RBG. I wasn't planning to do this for these complete watch-through episodes for Doctor Who, but since I was mentioned so much in this one, almost the unseen man in the room, I felt the need to just jump in and correct the record on some things, and also it was just an excuse because, of course, I wanted to jump in on this. I wanted to talk about these episodes too, but my schedule hasn't been lining up too well with these guys, so it is what it is. But sneaking in a little backdoor bonus section, I'm going to try to keep this relatively short. I don't want to, take up too much time. Just wanted to give my brief little thoughts, and I'd actually rewatched this not that long ago, and I covered it quite a few years ago now on my old Doctor Who podcast, Doctor Who the Crow Hat podcast, which doesn't exist anymore. So I've dug into it quite a bit over the years, and I've had kind of an evolving opinion on Rose. I didn't see this when it first was released here in North America. The first episode that I caught when it was live airing was actually a little bit later in the season, and I caught a few of them at the time and was not a fan, to say the least. And kind of dropped off Doctor Who for a while until the 3rd season of RTD. But as I came back and rewatched Rose for the first time, definitely didn't like it. I was comparing it too much to the introduction of the Autons in the Classic series during the 3rd Doctor's era. And yeah, definitely just there's a level of fear and the way that they're handled that feels much more legitimate in the classic series, where it feels a little bit, I don't know, the design of the Autons, the mannequin men, they just don't look scary. They look like big, like rubber-headed men, and I don't know, they just look a bit silly to me. But I at least appreciate the fact that right out of the gate, they're calling back to Classic Who. And, I've said over the years on MHC that I never feel like New Doctor Who truly feels like a continuation of the classic series. It feels like it's a very different mode, and none of it really ever feels like it could truly connect as a true continuation. But this one, there's some nice little kisses and nods, enough to make it feel like, oh, feels like it's respecting the old show coming in. And so I appreciate that in retrospect. And especially in comparison to many of the stuff that comes later, I think that this episode feels like a more solid continuation than what we actually ended up getting for the rest of the show. And I appreciated something that Isaac pointed out that I've always been very displeased about with New Doctor Who, and it's consistent through all the runs throughout the entire 20 years of New Who. And you can see it right out of the gate. RTD was introducing it here, and you'd see it again a lot more in his initial run, and then even worse later. But it's that kind of playing with the fourth wall where it almost feels like they're writing this show in a meta way, like they know, like, oh, this show had a pre-baked audience. Oh, some of us, especially the writers, perhaps, oh, we thought it was this silly old show and now we're resurrecting it. That meta quality, I think you can still feel in this episode, and that's not so great. But for RTD himself in this episode, apart from that little bit of a meta quality in there, I do think he gets in some good lines, and I think in introducing Doctor Who back to a new audience, I think he actually does a pretty solid job, especially, coming off of the previous era of New Doctor Who. By the time we get to the 80s, a lot of the mystery of the Doctor had been mostly exposed and maybe overexposed. They tried to reintroduce some of it near the end, but there was a good period there, especially during the 5th and the 6th Doctor's era, where we definitely, had a pretty good idea of the Doctor's background and history. So it was nice coming in with this new series that they were finding ways to add a little bit of mystery back to the show. That I appreciated. And Christopher Eccleston himself, I think, does a decent job distinguishing himself, giving us a Doctor that does feel definitely fresh and different than almost anything we got in the classic series. He really doesn't feel like he necessarily fits in the mold of classic series Doctors. Definitely fits a lot closer in the mold to new series Doctors, but still among them he stands out. And I've always appreciated Eccleston as an actor from some of, I'm a horror fan, always have been. And so actually when this series aired, I actually did recognize him as, one of the central baddies in 28 Days Later. And so I was kind of like, oh, it's kind of weird to see the Doctor and then, in the back of my mind, have that movie in my head, because I was a giant fan of that movie in the early aughts. And so I was a little bit, hesitant with him. And, the more I saw of what New Who was, he was part of the reason why I was quite put off by it when it initially aired. But again, I've seen him in a lot more stuff over the years and seen that he has a lot more range and depth of an actor. And so coming and seeing him in this Doctor Who role, I just like to see that particular side of him. And especially because we got so few episodes, it's always kind of refreshing to go back and be like, oh, the potential, I wish we could have gotten more from him. And I feel sad that I haven't actually gone out and sought out any of the audio dramas that he's done now that he's taken up with Big Finish. He started doing that all the way back in 2021, and I still haven't caught any of that stuff, so definitely want to check that out. Rose as well, I've always been kind of mixed on her as a companion, but I will say most of that stuff comes from later in the run. In this first episode, I do think that she's charming. I think that RTD gives her some good lines, and her chemistry with Christopher Eccleston, I think, is pretty good. I do think that they didn't give us enough time to really, get a good grasp on her in this episode, but I think it was just enough to, pique my interest and make me curious to see where it's going to go, even if, again, much later on, I was not necessarily a fan of where it all went, but that's for a much later day. And one of my complaints that often comes up on the podcast with New Doctor Who, I never much cared for RTD and the succeeding showrunners, how much screen time they devoted to the domestic life of the companions. Again, I'm not going to say too much about that because I know Isaac hasn't seen a lot of it, But I'll just say that that was one of the aspects that I often complain about with New Doctor Who. But I do think it works well as a place to introduce the companion, kind of show what their life was and why they would choose to, leave it all to travel with the Doctor. But like Isaac said, I do think that they could have done a better job showing that she, has some gaps that she really wants to fill. We do see that, okay, maybe she works a job that she doesn't like that much. They don't really show us that, but, she's working a job at a shop that doesn't look like it would be something that, you'd have a lot of passion for. And they do show us that Mickey, her boyfriend, is a little bit non-present. I like that scene where he comes to her like, oh, I just heard about what happened with your store. Like, are you okay? Oh, let's go to the pub. I think you need a stronger drink. But it turns out that he's just doing that only because he wants to go see a football game. Like, okay, so maybe he's not super present. And then her mom is just, her mom. You can see her here. She's a little absent-minded. She's a little bit, maybe a bit much. So they give us some bits, but I do think they could have emphasized more, just like Isaac said, as to why she would be so quick to leave it all. For the CGI, which I was mentioned on that bit, I actually don't have that many complaints for the CGI in this one. It's of its time, I'm perfectly fine with it. The only part that I have a problem with is the usage of having the garbage can eating Mickey and then burping. Like, okay, the CGI looked stupid. I wouldn't have made that choice if it was me, but whatever, it's of its time. But the burp is just like, oh, that's totally RTD. That's his sense of humor. It's a very juvenile sense of humor, and maybe minor spoilers for Isaac, but we'll see that kind of thing again and again. And that's actually when I first watched New Doctor Who back in 2006, I think it would have been. Actually, you know what? I had satellite in 2005, and I had access to all the BBC channels. So I think I did actually watch this in 2005, now that I think about it. I was actually watching classic Doctor Who still at that point in the aughts because of my satellite. I was able to access all sorts of different channels. But when I checked out some of those other Series 1 episodes that contain that kind of humor, that was one of the reasons that I was just like, whoa, they turned Doctor Who into like this embarrassing joke TV show. And I just, was so put off I didn't return. So it's moments like that that definitely stand out and continue to stand out. I've always hated that burp. And the Mickey bit, Eric and Isaac liked the plastic design. Like, okay, I wasn't a particular fan, but especially the pizza moment, I just thought was a bit embarrassing. I did not care for that. But for Murray Gold, which I was also mentioned on, this has been my last point. It's getting a bit too long. I actually don't mind his music here so much. We hear an introduction to Rose's theme. Never liked Rose's theme, so I don't love that. And some of his more action-y music is just a little bit too bombastic and weird. But his overall incidental music is okay. As long as we're staying away from some of his main themes, like it's actually not that bad in this episode. But really one of my central problems with Murray Gold, especially during this era, is I often feel like the mixing of his tracks is way too loud and way too forefront in the audio mix in general. And so sometimes it can drown out the dialogue. We get a lot more of that later into Series 1, but we see it at least twice, I noticed, in this episode, where the music is mixed either at the same level of the dialogue or louder, and it just makes me kind of wonder, like, what were they doing there? So, but overall, I don't hate Murray Gold's music here, and I don't hate RTD's writing here. I think both of them were doing okay work, and RTD was actually doing pretty solid work. So, despite being an anti-RTD person, the entirety of New Doctor Who, from Series 1 on, I've never been a fan of him, really. The stuff that really worked throughout that era, I didn't necessarily ascribe most of that to RTD himself. Despite being a showrunner, I think most of the standouts were not scripts that he wrote, except for a few. And the overall series arcs and stuff like that, character arcs, was not a fan of. But for this episode, I do think that RTD did a good job in reintroducing Doctor Who in a way that would be palatable for a new audience. I will say, Eric was asking repeatedly, like, oh, what would you prefer, this or the 60s? I mean, I'd love 60s Doctor Who. I really enjoy An Unearthly Child, both the initial episode and the Tribe of Gum serial. I think that there's some really good writing in both parts of that, and 60s Who is, I really love that period of the show. So definitely for me, it's Hartnell all the way. One of my favorite Doctors, I will say. So definitely agree with Isaac there. But overall, Rose, back on my old Doctor Who podcast, I did this rating scale with silver, gold, bronze, and a pile of trash. And my rating for this, I went and looked back at what it was. I actually rated this one as a fine piece of silver. There's a little bit of splotches on it of, a little bit of some areas that could have used some more polish, but overall a piece of fine silver. So, there you go. That's probably close to a 4, 3.5 or a 4, somewhere around there in Eric's rating scale. So, overall I'm pretty okay with Rose. But yeah, sorry this one's so long. Did not mean for it to go past 10 minutes. But definitely looking forward to see what Eric and Isaac think of the Daleks. And going forward, I'm very happy to see them continuing this series. But look forward to hearing it on the next episode on this feed. And catch us on the next one. Peace.